Here at Contingent History, I take a historical critical approach to studying the past. While I understand that historical truth is not the only type of truth out there, I do believe that discovering what most probably happened in the past is a pivotal foundation for us to build upon. I've always loved history, not because I love memorizing dates and the names of random dead people or something like that, but because I love stories and I love learning about how things came to be the way they are. Over the years, there have been many books about various aspects of history which have left an indelible impression on me and have shaped my personal and intellectual journey. So today, I wanted to share 5 of those books with you. The first one is Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind by Yuval Noah Harari. This book tackles the long and complex history of the human species, but it does so in a way that is interesting and digestible. It examines the impacts of agriculture and contemporary technologies on human societies, and it touches on various branches of the human family tree, of which Homo sapiens, that's us, is one among many. But the most lasting takeaway from this book was that humans are storytellers, and that our ability to tell stories and to do so collectively is what has allowed us to have this brief moment in the spotlight on Earth. Harari argues that most aspects of our lives are some form of a story. Things like money, nationhood, corporations, religion. All of those things are collections of useful fictions that help us cooperate and piece together the complex world around us. Next is Kindred, Neanderthal Life, Love, Death, and Art by Rebecca Ragg Sykes. Neanderthals were initially discovered early in the 19th century, though they were not identified as such right away. It was not until additional fossil remains were found in the Neander Valley in Germany in 1856 that scientists began to realize that there had once been another human species living alongside us. Kindred touches on these discoveries and their implications, but it's primarily a book about the complex lives of the Neanderthals. In a sense, it's an effort to redeem them from the inaccurate dumb caveman narratives that pop culture often hurls at them through a comprehensive analysis of current archaeological and genetic discoveries. Neanderthals lived in shelters, they loved one another, created and wore clothing, used fire and handmade tools, they made art, and they buried their dead, sometimes with flowers and other decorative items. This last item is wild to me and has so many interesting implications. And in a very real way, Neanderthals are still living with us. Through genetic testing and research, it's now believed that most people of non-African descent derive between 1 and 4% of their genomes from Neanderthals. This was due to interbreeding that occurred between them and our sapiens ancestors. Next on the list is Guns, Germs, and Steel, The Fates of Human Societies by Jared Diamond. Why were Europeans able to conquer much of the world instead of being conquered by others? This is the driving question behind this book. And while there are several intersecting possible answers to this, Diamond suggests that agriculture plays a central role. Agriculture developed independently at different times across different places, beginning around 13,000 years ago, but the type of agriculture differed from place to place. The agricultural landscape in Europe, for example, included staple crops that allowed for large population spikes and the rise of many specialists and innovators who didn't need to engage in subsistence farming, but could instead become creators of pivotal technologies, some of which would eventually aid in colonization efforts. Additionally, and perhaps most pivotally, European interactions with certain domesticated animals allowed the development of immunities to several animal-borne diseases. For instance, influenza and pox viruses came from animals such as pigs and cows, which were not in the Americas until after European colonization in the 1500s. Thus, when Europeans arrived in the Americas, they brought with them deadly diseases which native people groups had no immunities to. Some have estimated that diseases accounted for nearly 90% of the deaths of natives during the early stages of European colonization. Diamond's suggestion that agriculture is a central technology that gave certain people groups advantages over others is not without merit, and Guns, Germs, and Steel emphasizes the role of geographical luck while dispelling notions of superiority and Eurocentrism that often creep into discussions of history. Next is Origin Story, A Brief History of Everything by David Christian. Of all the books on this list, Origin Story most robustly utilizes the interdisciplinary approach to the study of big history. It lays out in digestible detail the Big Bang theory of cosmic origins, the development of life on Earth, the rise of the human species, and a look into possible futures for the known universe. This is not the only book I would recommend on these wide-ranging topics, but it's perhaps the one that I would most quickly suggest to those interested in diving into these subjects in a brief manner. Why do we think the observable universe is at least 13.8 billion years old? What evidence do we have for Darwinian evolutionary theory? These questions and more are adequately addressed by Christian, and I found myself leaving this book with a better appreciation for the grand scope of the cosmological story that we are all a part of. And last for today is A History of the World in Six Glasses by Tom Standage. This book was really fun to read because it looked at history through a unique lens, the things that we drink. It traces the origins and impacts of beer, wine, spirits, coffee, tea, and Coca-Cola, and it shows how the creation, consumption, and dissemination of these beverages shaped societies from prehistory to the present. Some of these drinks, like coffee, tea, and Coca-Cola, have played less than admirable roles in agendas of imperialism and globalization, serving as conduits for powerful entities to gain footholds in various places around the world. But it has not all been detrimental. Coffee, for example, became the drink of reason, an alternative to alcohol which helped promote sober thinking and conversation in Enlightenment-era coffee houses across Europe, where groups would gather to drink dishes of coffee in cozy, book-laden rooms. One of the more striking things that stuck out to me from this book was the way in which many of these beverages have acted as the relational fibers of societies. From ancient Mesopotamia to present-day New York City, these beverages have formed the relational rituals that we have with one another. And when we consume them, we are consuming innumerable strands of history and all of the complexities therein. So each of these books in their own way have helped give a more definitive shape to history and our collective past. I consider understanding broader history to be an integral part of my own life and my present academic work because it places those things within larger settings. And perhaps most of all, books like these have helped to decenter me, and in some cases the entire human species, from the great cosmological story, while also giving me a greater appreciation for some of our most unifying and collective traits like storytelling and innovation. So I hope that this is a helpful list for you. Let me know if there are any other good reads out there that you'd recommend, and thanks for joining me today on Contingent History.